One thing that we know is that the world is getting increasingly hostile to a Christian worldview and to an outlook that is based on biblical truth.
Well, there was a time in our country when people automatically believed in the Judeo-Christian values and knew what they were. But today, they're not taught that in school, they're not hearing it in the media, they're not hearing it much in church.
And it's really important for people of faith, Christians, to step up to the plate, to be engaged in the conversation in the public arena.
Christianity is not a way of life, it is life. And as conservatives, I believe it is incumbent upon us to rightly represent our Lord.
Yeah, I think it's the same responsibility that every American should have, really, is that we should be involved in the political cycle. I think it's also important for us to get others engaged that are like-minded, to make sure that our voices are heard and that our views are represented.
Welcome to the Conservatives for Kentucky Convention. I'm Richard Nelson, Executive Director of the Commonwealth Policy Center. Over the next hour, you're going to hear from some great leaders about pressing issues that affect all of us in the Commonwealth. But first, what does it mean to be a conservative? In a foundational sense, it's the belief that human beings are made in the image of God, and this is what gives each of us inherent dignity and value. It means that rights come from God and not the government. The right to life is a foundational right, and it's non-negotiable. And the duty of government is to protect innocent human life. Religious freedom is secured by the First Amendment, and the obligation of government is to respect religious freedom, not infringe upon it. A conservative believes that government is not the Savior, but there is a Savior found in Jesus Christ who graciously offers new life in Him. He resets our spiritual lives and gives us a path to healing and flourishing. It's our desire to see Kentucky become the best version of itself, to see leaders who focus on securing inalienable rights instead of grievance peddling, to maintain the rule of law, to protect private property, to provide a level playing field of maximum opportunity so that each of us can fill our God-given calling. Kentucky, there is so much potential. Let's work together for a better Commonwealth. Thank you, and may God bless.
Few people appreciate the value of the American dream than those who came from another country. Up next, you'll hear the inspiring story of Kentucky's first Latino elected to the state Senate, Senator Ralph Alvarado.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Ralph Alvarado, and I serve as the Kentucky State Senator from the 28th District, which includes Clark, Montgomery, and Fayette counties. I'm a physician by trade, and now a bit of a politician as well. And I'm accustomed to providing talks about health care or the political topics of the day. But when I was asked by the Commonwealth Policy Center to come and talk about diversity and leadership and the American dream, I jumped at the chance. I take a lot of pride in my Hispanic background and status as an elected official, so I thought I would talk a little bit about my story. I'm the first Hispanic member ever elected into the Kentucky General Assembly, and as a physician, I never envisioned being involved in politics. I grew up, went to college, medical school, and got married in California, and my wife and I moved to Kentucky for residency, where I say that we got Kentuckified. And I was always faithful about voting and watching some national politics, but I didn't really become serious until 2000 during the Gore-Bush campaign. And as I began to see needs in Kentucky for the practice of medicine, I made those issues known to my representatives without satisfaction from them. And I voiced to my wife that I needed to become more involved. Through a unique series of events, I was asked to run for office. And over the ensuing 11 years, I ran for office 4 times, finally winning on my final attempt. The runs were difficult, and I encountered episodes of racism from my Democrat opponents during those runs. But in the end, the results were positive, and I'm addressing you today as a state senator. I don't know if there's any children of immigrants watching this right now, but I can tell you that I'm the son of legal immigrants to this country. My father always wanted to be an American. He was 44 years old when he made the momentous decision to leave everything behind for a fresh start. I could tell you stories about his struggles of adaptation, such as language at home and work. But to make a long story short, he met my mother, who was also an immigrant from Argentina. They got married, settled down, and had me and my brother. My father always took tremendous pride in being an American. When he became a citizen, he never missed a vote and instilled the same pride in my brother and I about our nationality and citizenship. Citizenship, now that's a word that we don't hear about or talk about much anymore. but it's a word that ultimately binds all of us as Americans. We can be diverse, but our citizenship is our commonality. And I think the best public servants are citizen politicians. That's ultimately what our forefathers envisioned from our leaders in our country. A citizen who was willing to give of himself or herself for the sake of their community. And if there was a great American who embodied and spoke about the importance of citizenship, you have to think about Teddy Roosevelt. His remarkable vision, dedication, sacrifice, and sometimes even obsession helped shape America's national park system as we know it today. And unfortunately, most of our kids don't even hear about him very much anymore. He's just another dead president to some, but his words for this country are eternal. Roosevelt once delivered a great speech where he viewed American citizenship as a right that must be earned, maintained, and protected. He argued that if freedom and self-government are worth having, then people must labor to retain freedom through combination with our fellows who have the same interests and the same principles. He also hoped that more young people would go into public service, claiming that the first duty of an American citizen is that he should work in politics. His second duty is that he should do that work in a practical manner. And his third is that it should be done in accord with the highest principles of honor and justice. Our national discourse right now doesn't seem to have any principles, just a lot of angry people on all sides who are unwilling to find common ground. It was Roosevelt's belief that it was every citizen's duty to be a productive member of society. He thought that by everyone working together, the country as a whole could become even greater than the sum of all of its rather significant parts. My parents knew what this country had to offer and got here as quickly as they could. They embraced being American. They embraced being citizens and all that that afforded them. They embraced those responsibilities that President Roosevelt was so passionate about and warned us not lose lest we lose ourselves and our own identity. Now let's talk about our future as Americans during times of uncertainty and primarily focusing on minorities and immigrants. Our challenge is the same challenge every immigrant has faced in America since its inception. Our parents and ancestors faced a lot of hardships to give us the opportunity to do what we are doing, the opportunity to be here today. Parents and ancestors have left countries with corruption, crime, lack of opportunity. To get ahead, you would have to have the right connections or the money to buy bribes. America, with all of its imperfections, still provides everyone that chance to advance ourselves and achieve our highest potential, regardless of the station of our birth or social background. Anytime I speak to young minority groups, I want to make sure that they appreciate how cool their background is. Some people act like they would be better off being white, and I would disagree. I take a lot of pride in being Latino, and after all, the diversity of culture in this country is what makes our country strong. But speaking directly to the children or grandchildren of immigrants, know that you have a big responsibility. Your success is the payoff for the years of sacrifice of your parents and grandparents. They've sacrificed themselves to provide you this opportunity. Don't squander it. Don't take it for granted. Honor their sacrifice for you by succeeding. Know that the keys for success for us as a group is hard work, obedience to the law, and education. Know that what you do and how you act reflects on all of us. Don't think that I don't realize that there are a lot of eyes on me in the General Assembly. I'm the first in Kentucky, and how I act, how I perform will reflect on all Hispanics as much as it reflects on me directly. Whether it's right or wrong, people by human nature generalize. And if they see one person do something, they assume the whole group is the same way. Remember that others are watching you to succeed or to fail. Make us all proud and achieve the most that you can. And one other topic I wanted to talk about today is discrimination. When or if you hear it or experience it, it's okay to be angry. I get angry. Just know how to channel that anger. Let me tell you one thing I learned pretty early on. You're not going to convince a bigot not to be a bigot. Unfortunately, people will have their biases and they're always going to have discrimination. Know that yelling at somebody, calling them names, getting violent does nothing. All that does is adds to the stereotype and to the bias that others will have about you. Channel that energy into success. Nothing will eat at a bigot more than having to watch the person that he or she dislikes succeed more than them, achieve more than them, get a higher education than them, become more American than them, or fulfill the American dream more than them. That's how you get even. And as a group, let's all take pride in what we are, Americans. We outperform the world and we live in the greatest country on earth. Let's work together to make sure that the next generation understands that reality as well. Thank you very much, and God bless.
America was shaped by biblical principles. Historically, Christians have shaped our laws, But in recent decades, that's changed. HERSHAEL York will talk about why Christians must re-engage government in elections.
I'm convinced that a robust Christian faith leads to maximum human flourishing. It's really what is best for us. First of all, Christianity puts us in touch with our Creator, our designer, because He designed us. He knows best how we function, what our purpose is, what we're made to do, what we're capable of doing. And when we live for God's purpose within God's design, we have respect for others and respect for ourselves. When we comprehend and accept that every human being is created in the image of God and is therefore worthy of dignity, of respect, of love, and human rights, well, that shapes and informs the way we treat our fellow men and women. Racism, for instance, can never be eradicated by government or mandated Marxist values, but it can be when Christians genuinely see all fellow human beings as bearers of God's image. When they follow the Bible's instruction, not merely to treat others as our equals, but as our betters. When each esteems other better than themselves, as the Apostle Paul wrote. Our work is transformed by Christian values. A consistent Christian worldview treasures the value of work. Work is a gift God gave to humanity before sin ever entered the world. And only Christianity understands that the need to work productively is not simply something we do to make money, but it's part of God's wonderful design to help us serve others and enjoy the satisfaction of accomplishment and stalwart effort. Every employer should be calling churches and saying, hey, could you send some of those Spirit-filled Christians over? They do the job better than anyone else. They take the jobs that no one else wants. They work harder than anyone. That's what robust Christianity does in one's life. Also, our home life will be shaped and find fulfillment in God's design for the sexes and for sex. Only Christians can know true intimacy because they realize that sex is not merely for pleasure or even merely for procreation, but it's a sacred bond between a man and a woman who are in covenant relationship with one another for life. The world has lived a lie and treated sex casually, instead of understanding how our sexuality is a gift from God that is innately tied to who we are and an expression of God's own creativity. Denying the sacred nature of our sexuality has led not only to cheapening sex, but to unbiblical and unscientific theories that gender is fluid and that sex is assigned at birth rather than designed by our Creator who knows us best and who has our very best at heart. Only Christianity provides a satisfying acknowledgement of sin's origin and reality. The United States Constitution has a system of checks and balances because the founders were so shaped by Christian theology and worldview that they understood that when systems can be misused for personal power and gain, they will be. So they constructed a system in which each branch of government needs to be held in check by the other two. Well, the Bible explains sin's origin, so we know where it came from. But most importantly, it also explains sin's cure in the person and the work of Jesus Christ. Now, this is, of course, Christianity's greatest contribution. The Bible teaches that every human being is innately sinful, which is very different from all other worldviews that have either no explanation for sin or in some cases deny it completely. They have no category for it. But these worldviews hardly diagnose the problem, let alone offer a cure. Christians know that education alone can't make us better. Hitler's Nazi regime arose in what was arguably the best educated nation in the world at that time. But Christianity alone offers forgiveness and redemption in the person and the work of Jesus Christ. Only He can give us both forgiveness and redemption through faith in Him. There's nothing more significant in this world than a biblical worldview that is rooted in the person and the work of Jesus Christ, and that serves as the lens through which we look at everything else. A robust Christian faith makes life better.
I think we all realize that there's been a major shift in our nation over the past several decades. No longer do we have a shared moral compass. We're seeing what a culture looks like when it abandons Christian values.
I think we keep moving the line. I think we put a line in the sand, and this is right and this is wrong, and then we, things transpire, and so we move the line, and then we move the line, and then we move the line, and it's gotten to the point where there's no black and white. I believe there is a definitive right and a definitive wrong, but we've taken an eraser out and made all of that gray.
I would say from a Christian perspective, I feel like we have kind of turned God into Play-Doh, is what I would say. And we've kind of conformed him to look like our culture. And we said, hey, this is God. Well, those of us who hold the truth, we know that we can't conform God into anything. He conforms us into him.
We believe in an objective truth. We believe that this objective truth comes from the person and the work of God revealed in the Scriptures and in the person and work of Jesus Christ. So if you're looking at what's happening through the lens of objective reality and truth, it's going to inform your thinking on every single issue out there. On the other hand, if you don't believe in objective truth, then you're going to look at things in a very, very skewed manner. In fact, you're going to change things to fit your own personal opinions and views.
I don't know that the values have shifted. I think Christians have shifted. The values are the same, and if you're a Christian, you know that God doesn't change. And his values don't change.
I like to use the terminology of like the water dripping on a limestone rock. The first drop doesn't make a difference, but as it continues to drop after drop after drop, then there is a dramatic shift. And to me, that's exactly what has happened in the United States, is that it's just for the last 50 years especially, we've seen that drops of water on the limestone rock. And so what we have to do is we have to understand just every drop and what the implications are.
Well, the Bible says in the last days, because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. So the prediction of the Bible is not that things are going to get better and better. But I think it's the job of the Christian to be the watchman on the wall and to speak the truth in love, but to find some way to stand up for those values so that our children and our children's children are going to have the opportunities that we've had to grow up in such a great nation.
I think we're nervous as a country because we see American values, which are often based off of Judeo-Christian values, are under attack. And those are being eroded, and the America that many of us have grown up with and are very happy with is slipping away. And that's what I think I'm nervous about, I'm fearful of. I try to hang on to those American values as long as we can.
I feel like I think anyone, not just conservatives, should be concerned about where we're heading.
Well, I know the end of the book, and I know who wins ultimately, and I praise the Lord for that. And but right now we are in a situation where we have to think future. We have to think about our children's future.
Christians have a fine line to walk. We need to be aware of the real dangers that we face every time there's an election, every time there is a new push by the left in our country, particularly the cultural elites and that control the media, Hollywood, all of that. They really do have an agenda that they constantly push on us. Our children are growing up saturated in it. So we should obviously be very, very concerned, but we should never be fearful.
And so I think for a lot of us, we've bought into this lie, and traditional values, things that we hold true and dear, we're allowing those things to break down when those are the very things that made our country strong.
I think we should be very nervous. We continue to drift further and further and further away from our Christian beliefs that our founding fathers employed and stood upon, that our country was founded upon. It's like that has no place in our society today.
Religious freedom is something we take for granted until our own religious freedom is threatened. Blaine Adamson, owner of Hands On Originals, shares his story of fighting for religious freedom all the way to the state Supreme Court.
It has always been our passion at Hands On Originals to take our customers' ideas and messages and make them better. We hope to design shirts that people will be excited to take out of the drawer and actually wear. I never thought, while pursuing this passion, it would cause so much controversy, but that's exactly what I've experienced since declining to print the shirts that the GLSO requested in 2012. People often ask me why I made that decision. Here's what I tell them. I will work with any person, no matter who they are, no matter what their belief systems are. But when they present a message that conflicts with my religious beliefs, that's not something that I can print. That's the line for me. I do not leave my faith at the door when I walk into my business, and everyone, my customers, my employees, and my community is better for it. For over 7 years, the government tried to punish me for declining to print a message that violated my conscience. Thankfully, the lower courts upheld my freedom as a creative professional, and the Kentucky Supreme Court agreed as well. As I have gone through this process, I have often marveled that something like this can actually occur in America. This is not the way it should be. People don't surrender their freedom of speech when they choose to make a living as a creative professional. We're not free if our beliefs are confined just to our minds. Under every government regime or even a dictator, people believe what they want in their mind. What makes America unique is our freedom to peacefully live out those beliefs. Every American should be free to live and work according to their faith, without the fear of punishment by the government. I'm hopeful that as we choose to stand and not cower, we'll help protect those freedoms for generations to come.
As Americans, we have tremendous freedom. This freedom opens us to daily choices, some good, some not so good. Hall of Fame jockey Pat Day will talk about choices and a profound course correction he made in his life.
In this great country, we have the freedom to choose, and life offers a lot of choices, some good, some not so good. I'm sorry to say that I made a lot of not so good choices that led to a sordid life of drugs, alcohol, and broken relationships. An encounter with Jesus Christ on the evening of January 27, 1984, when I accepted Him as my Lord and Savior, was the best choice of my life. By His grace, I was set free of that lifestyle and began making good choices that led to a much better quality of life. A rock-solid marriage of 41 years, a daughter and son-in-law who know, love, and trust in Jesus, a Hall of Fame career as a professional jockey, and now in retirement from riding races, I have the opportunity to work with the Racetrack Chaplaincy of America, sharing the gospel with the horse racing industry. On November 3rd, we all have a choice to make. We have the opportunity to have our voices heard at the polling booth. I have heard it said that this is the most important election in our country's history. Our conservative values and way of life hang in the balance. May I encourage you today, register and vote. Vote for those individuals who share our conservative views. The choice is clear.
Law enforcement is something we take for granted until we need it. Unfortunately, the law enforcement community has become the target of attack, and some are calling for defunding the police. The next speaker is Steve Spurlock, who spent his entire life serving in law enforcement.
Greetings, fellow Kentuckians. My name is Steve Spurlock, and it's an honor to speak with you today. I'm a lifelong native of Pikeville and a retired sergeant from the Kentucky State Police. I'm also a former Marine, and now I'm an ordained Baptist preacher. Prior to becoming a trooper, I was stationed as an MP at Quantico, Virginia, and assigned to the home of Marine One in direct support of the President of the United States. I was blessed to have been able to serve under and travel with two U.S. presidents, President Ronald Reagan and President George H.W. Bush. Today, I have over 30 years of service in policing and investigations and also teaching criminal justice. I'm a chaplain to local fire departments, the Pike County Sheriff's Department, and have been a member of the Kentucky Community Crisis Response Team. I'm one of the co-founders of Armor Bearers, a network of Baptist preachers offering free biblical counseling and chaplain services to law enforcement and first responders nationwide. Most of the time, we take law enforcement for granted. But when we're in an emergency, we realize how much we need it. Unfortunately, law enforcement has come under attack. We live in the most volatile time I've ever seen. We have watched as protests in our streets turned into anarchy and lawlessness. Earlier, we praised the police for their sacrifice. Now, we've turned our backs on them as they're ambushed in broad daylight. In St. Louis alone, 10 officers have been shot since June. 9 of those were active duty. 1 of those died, along with retired Captain David Dorn. Just prior to this convention, 2 L.A. County deputies were ambushed in their patrol vehicle, and another officer was shot outside of a courthouse in Arizona. This is unacceptable. Have we come to the place in our great Commonwealth and in these United States where so much divisiveness and lawlessness exists? Is it because we rejected the idea of sin and consequences? Is it because we've rejected the God of the Bible who is the ultimate standard for justice? President Abraham Lincoln said during the Civil War, he was asked if God was on the side of the Union. He replied, "Sir, my concern's not whether God is on our side. My greatest concern is to be on God's side, for God is always right." I know from my own experience the wonderful relief of peace and contentment that comes with personally knowing the one true Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And to be true to Him in my life includes voting for Christian values during this election. My friends, the overwhelming majority of law enforcement officers do right and are sacrificing for the rest of us. Let's realize our need to support them and stand with them, because our society or any civil society cannot exist without law enforcement. Thank you, and may God bless you.
The right to life is the most basic of our human rights. Representative Nancy Tate is a pro-life advocate in Kentucky's legislature, and she'll talk about why the right to life is so important.
Human life is the most precious gift from God. Humans are our greatest asset. So frequently, many are accused of not caring about children after their birth. Fortunately, that is far from the truth. Most, if not nearly all of us, love and support each other. The vast majority of us are dedicated to providing opportunities for all to fulfill their highest potential. Regardless of where the home is or the physical or intellectual abilities, each person must be given the opportunity to utilize their God-given talents. It must also be understood that these gifts are not the same for all. Therefore, the solution cannot be the same. So frequently, many of us think opportunities can only be accomplished with money. I want to refer to a quote from Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta. She said, "We think sometimes that poverty is only being hungry, naked, and homeless. The poverty of being unwanted, unloved, and uncared for is the greatest poverty." We must start in our own homes and communities to remedy this kind of poverty. Mother Teresa's quote sums up the basis of the sanctity of life. The basic need of us to feel that our lives are valued, that we are wanted, and that we are loved and cared for. So frequently it is stated that when killing a human, we may be destroying the inventor of the cure for cancer or the person who has the ability to create world peace. By so readily accepting abortion as a solution to social and economic issues, we very likely could be destroying opportunities for solutions to those very issues. 40 years ago, abortion was selected as the solution for many social and economic issues when technology was not as advanced as it is today. When Roe v. Wade was ruled on in 1973, the presiding judges stated that they did not have the means of determining when life began. Since then, the invention and common use of ultrasound has given medical professionals the ability to now determine when life begins. For life can be detected by an ultrasound at 17 days of conception, since the heartbeat can be seen before it is heard. Also, technology has given us the ability to increase and enhance the availability of food. 40 years ago, there was a concern that we would not be able to feed the world's population. While abortion and death should never be a solution, many of the arguments used to justify its use for population control 40 years ago have been minimized, if not eliminated. Life is a precious gift from God that should not be squandered or undervalued. Children and babies are our future and should therefore be treated as a valuable asset.
Believability in mainstream news media is at an all-time low. Former president of the National Newspaper Association, Chip Hutchison, will talk about media bias.
My name is Chip Hutchison, and I would like to speak to you today about news media bias. Various surveys tell us that many people distrust the news media. A common finding is that conservatives do not see their views or opinions reflected in mainstream news coverage. It's important here to make a distinction. What is fake news and what is news media bias? Fake news is information that is presented as factual, but is not. It typically has the goal of damaging a person or an entity. The content may be 100% false, or it can be content that is taken out of context. It may be content that is misleading or is manipulated to suit the writer's pleasure. Much more subtle is news media bias. We should note that everyone has a bias of some sort. What is necessary is to be aware of that bias, and then for the reporter to always be on guard not to let any bias permeate into the news reporting efforts. News media can show itself in the area of politics, religion, business, economics, even demographics. Cities versus rural populations is a great example. Media bias is seen not only in the way a story is presented, but whether that story is presented at all. The selection of events to cover and the way those events are covered can indicate bias. For instance, the governor's prayer breakfast does not get the statewide coverage that the Kentucky State Fair annual breakfast does. The bias against Christianity is demonstrated in interviews that people have with print and broadcast outlets when the person makes a clear reference to the value of their faith in a circumstance, but that part is left out of the story. Photos can show bias if they depict a person in a negative way, such as with their mouth open or showing a person appearing to sleep. It should be noted the significant difference between fair reporting and editorial, or what we call op-ed opinions. Media has the opportunity to voice their personal beliefs, but that should happen only when the article is clearly labeled as an editorial or opinion piece. That leads us to ask, what do Christians do? First, demonizing the liberal bias is not going to pay dividends. History proves that to us. This is not meant that we're to be silent, but it means that we're also not to be abrasive. Christians can have a voice, but we must do so the right way, by making critical arguments to what we observe related to media bias. In some cases, pointing out the bias from a calm, well-documented position can have a positive reward. More importantly, however, it seems to me that we need Christians who enter the media world who are firmly grounded in who they are and what they believe. It is intimidating to enter a workforce where liberal or postmodern views are the norm. Yes, but the person who is well-grounded can make a difference in those environments. No one has said it will be easy, but it can be done. In my first job out of college, a Christian coworker argued that the daily paper where we work should not publish a daily horoscope. Some were dumbfounded. They had never heard a reason why that should be discontinued. She gave a biblical response that our trust is in God, not in our horoscope. The paper did not change its policy, but when I became a newspaper owner in 1976, I was resolved by remembering that lady's argument not to have a horoscope. We never did because of one woman speaking truth from a biblical standpoint.
Sometimes we take our education for granted, but for a parent with a child trapped in an underperforming school, school choice becomes a top issue. Listen to why school choice is so important. Akia McNary Sullivan.
Hello, my name is Akia McNary Sullivan, and I would like to share my story with you. I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. As many folks know, Chicago does not have the best schools and neighborhoods. My mother was tasked with raising 4 children. Due to my mother's financial hardship, we were stuck in schools where fighting frequently occurred, and high schoolers like myself graduated with a 6th grade reading level. When I realized the terrible education that I was given, due to no fault of my own, I always knew that I would give something better to my own children. After having my first child, at the age of 18, I went to the University of Chicago Infant Study Program for them to help my son Raymond. I'll never forget the moment when everything changed. I was taking my baby to a nearby park when I realized that my surroundings were full of dirty needles, beer bottles, and gun activity. That is when a light went off in my head and I said I could not raise my son in these schools and neighborhood. That is why I'm here today in Northern Kentucky, because I wanted a better life for my kids. Raymond attended Collins Elementary and R.A. Jones Middle School. At R.A. Jones, Raymond's biggest problem was being bullied. In my opinion, administration did not handle it well, so I pulled Raymond from R.A. Jones and placed him into Heritage Christian Academy. He did well. No bullying, he had good grades and positive friendships. Raymond flourished. Unfortunately, I was no longer able to afford the private school. Raymond attended Rowell High School for his freshman year. To my frustration, the bullying started right back up. I was mad at myself because I wasn't able to afford for him to continue his private school education. Raymond's grades began to slip because of the bullying, which placed him in summer school for his sophomore and his junior year. He promised me that he was not going to let people affect him during his senior year. I find myself on a roller coaster ride when it comes to my children's education. There is always the high of making better choices for my children, but also a hard low when we struggle financially to make ends meet. My hope is for an education savings account to pass so that I will not have to go through the same ride with my youngest child, Monet. School choice should be available to everyone in Kentucky, not just those who can afford it. Opponents will often argue that school choice hurts public schools, but that is not true. Florida offers more school choice than any state. Its public schools just received their highest ranking ever, 3rd in the nation. Research showed that competition through school choice makes all schools perform better. Florida is a great example of how competition breeds excellence. Many surrounding states such as Tennessee, Indiana, Ohio, Virginia, and Illinois have recently passed school choice legislation. Also, North Carolina just extended its school choice program. My hope is that Kentucky will finally offer the same hope to our families in 2021.
The biblical passage says, "No greater love hath a man than he lay down his life for a friend." Our men and women in the armed forces put themselves in harm's way in order to keep us safe from our enemies and protect our freedom. Here's Aaron Reed to share his perspective.
Well, my life has always been geared towards a life of service. At a young age, I thought, well, I think I want to serve my country in style. You know, my dad was a Marine, still is a Marine, once a Marine, always a Marine. My brother's a Marine, so I thought I was going to be a Marine. I thought I was going to, go to officer candidate school out of college. I went to Morehead State University. There wasn't a lot of movies or books on Navy SEALs, but there was something that was drawing me to that work. I'd see these articles in Popular Mechanics, Popular Science magazines, and I'd see all these cool toys these guys are getting issued, so I started digging deeper, and I found out about the Navy SEALs, and I just started making that my mission. I kind of pulled back from the Marine Corps option and just focused on what it would take to become a SEAL. And I made that my mission in life. Freedom is, it's our lifeblood of our country. We are the home of the free only because of the brave. And if the brave, quit being brave, so to speak, freedom is going to be drained out of this country. Freedom isn't free, right? We You know, you've got service members and police officers, law enforcement, firemen, EMS guys out there serving their country. You know, they're getting hurt, they're putting it on the line. You know, freedom isn't free. It's hard earned. People have been taking freedom for granted. You know, every generation it gets a little bit more and more watered down and diluted. You know, the greatest generation, which, you know, the men and women who served in World War II, you hear them referred to as the greatest generation. And I feel like people forget, you know, what it took to defeat the evil that was in our face. Americans need to take risks. You know, that's why we're the greatest country in the world. And I feel like no one wants to do that anymore because they've lost their sense of bravery and duty and honor to their country. American exceptionalism is the reason why America still today is the greatest country in the world. It's our last stronghold for freedom and liberty. There's no packing up and leaving America to go someplace better. This is it. You know, the rest of the world, you know, we have legal immigrants coming to the United States all the time, every day. And those people come here with a dream. And I see it when they get here. I see legal immigrants coming into this country and grasping onto it with both arms and both feet. Love America, you know, God bless America. You know, they can't get enough of it. You know, they want to learn the language, they want to learn, you know, their history, they want to be an American. And those people I see succeed and they start businesses and they're entrepreneurs, and, you know, they're not professional victims. They come out and, you know, they don't know what welfare is. They don't know what entitlements are. They know that their life sucked in whatever country they came from. And they came to America to make a better life, and they did it. You know, and if you've never left this country and seen how bad it can be, then your perspective could be a little warped. You know, if you listen to the media and listen to the news, it is incredible at how awful our country appears to be, you know, when you spin it the right, you know, or the wrong way. You do your best to preserve America because you want to give something to your kids. You know, in Proverbs, you know, a good man leaves an inheritance to his grandchildren. You know, so I don't want to just leave a strong America for my kids, but I want to leave it for my grandchildren as well. It does take hard work. It doesn't, you know, just because you're an American doesn't mean you're just gonna be rich one day, or, you know, you're gonna be blessed with all this, you know, money raining down from the sky. You know, it might be that way for some people, but for the rest of us, you know, we have to work at it. You know, but you can work at it. You know, you get what you work for in America. You know, for the last 200 years, you know, our forefathers, they basically wrote the blueprint for greatness, and very little has changed in that blueprint since it was made. There's lots of heroes out there that people don't realize who stand between good and evil and to protect them, you know, especially law enforcement officers. You know, the thin blue line. Most people don't even know what the thin blue line is. It's the men and women in blue who man that gap and protect them from good and evil. You know, evil is like a lion roaming about the earth to devour. You know, there's evil around every corner. You know, and all of a sudden it feels like that evil is just growing. They're taking for granted that there's good men and women that are willing to serve and protect them. And, you know, it's crazy. You know, being a soldier and being a Christian is easy. You know, you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for your country, you're doing it for your fellow man.
Hi, Richard Nelson here with the Commonwealth Policy Center. It's no secret that we're living in troubled times. There's violence in our major cities, there's racial strife, some are even tearing down monuments of our national figures. This is frightening to many. But let me encourage you, now is not the time of fear or retreat from the public policy realm. That's why we're launching Faith Wins Kentucky. Faith Wins Kentucky is an effort to help mobilize and engage the church to vote biblical values this election on November the 3rd.
And that's right, Richard. There's 3 simple things that we're asking you to do. 1, you need to get registered to vote. If you're not currently registered, you can go to a button on our page at faithwinsky.org and actually click on that button. It'll take you right there. Kentucky's made it very easy to get registered. Number two, you can print out a registration card, fill it out, take it to your county clerk, or number three, just go to your county clerk's office and get registered. The second thing we want you to do is to make a pledge to vote biblical Christian values. If you're willing to do that, we're going to send you a free gift as a way of saying thank you for actually doing that. And number three, and most importantly, go vote your Christian principles at this election coming up.
Yeah, that's great, Bob. We're blessed with so many freedoms in this country. Freedoms that allow us to worship freely without fear of oppression, freedoms to choose our political leaders, freedom to pursue our calling that God has placed before us. But friends, we cannot expect others to preserve and protect our freedoms. We must do this, each and every one of us. If you care about biblical values, if you care about your God-given freedoms, then please, please, please be willing to engage the election, be willing to sign that pledge card, and make sure you get out and vote on Tuesday, November the 3rd. God bless you.
It's been said that if you don't vote, you don't have the right to complain. Up next, Secretary of State Michael Adams is going to talk about the importance of voting and the difference every vote can make.
Hello, I'm Michael Adams, your Secretary of State and Chief Elections Official. It's never been easier to vote in Kentucky than it is this year. You've got 4 convenient options to have your voice heard in our general election. First, you can vote in person on November 3rd. We've had great success working with our county clerks to open up more voting locations for Election Day. Number 2, you don't have to wait until November 3rd. Starting October 13th through November 2nd, we're going to have early in-person voting available 6 days a week. This is no excuse required, no appointment necessary, in-person voting. That's how I'll be voting, and I encourage you to vote that way too. Help us take the pressure off of November 3rd. Your third option is to vote absentee ballot by drop box. If you want the comfort and convenience of voting at home and avoiding crowds, but you also want the personal satisfaction of hand-delivering your ballot and knowing it's been received by your county clerk, then do that. Go to govoteky.com, apply for your absentee ballot, prove your identity. We'll mail you an absentee ballot, fill that out, and bring it back by November 3rd at 6 p.m. and drop it in the drop box your county clerk will have available. Fourth, you can vote absentee ballot by mail. In fact, we'll pay for your postage. Go to govoteky.com, request your absentee ballot, prove your identity, and then return that ballot to us no later than Election Day, November 3rd. It's important to vote. People have died for your right to do so. It's never been easier. There's no excuse in these times to not have your voice heard. We've had elections in Kentucky decided by 1 vote, 2 votes, 5 votes, 7 votes. We're not as red or blue state as people think. Your vote matters. So be sure, pick one of these options, and don't forget to vote.
Every vote matters, and first and foremost, it's a right that we have in this country. And that if we don't use those rights and defend those rights, we're bound to lose them. And I think a lot of people with a lot of vision when this country got established knew the importance of having a voice, of having the small guy have a voice. And if you think your vote doesn't matter, just look at Kentucky politics in the last 2-3 years. How many decisions have been made for elected officials? I think there were 7 races decided by less than 50 votes in the Kentucky legislature.
I think the interesting thing about our country is we, the people, make up this country. So our accountability to justice before God is to vote.
Yes, our vote matters. Absolutely. And I strongly urge everyone to register, to vote, to let their voice be heard.
America's national debt is over $26 trillion. Can we sustain such debt and maintain a sound economy? Up next, State Treasurer Allison Ball will speak about fiscal responsibility in government.
Hi, Hi, this is Kentucky State Treasurer Allison Ball, and I want to talk to you about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. My job is often called the watchdog of taxpayer dollars, and I was a bankruptcy attorney before I got elected to office, so I care about money and I care about fiscal responsibility. And I want to tell you a quick story that's going to, I think, convince you why this is important for you to be thinking about it too. In 1976, Michael Reagan, Ronald Reagan's son, went with his family to the Republican National Convention, and at this point in time, they thought they could get enough delegates so that way their dad, Ronald Reagan, could be the nominee for president that year. Well, those of you who know your history know that Reagan was not the nominee that year. Ford was the nominee. And in the course of that convention, Michael Reagan was with his family by themselves without his dad, and they were kind of discouraged. They were sad because they knew their dad wasn't going to be the nominee. And while they were there, they heard this knock on the door. They opened the door, and a man walks in who was obviously drunk, totally intoxicated, staggers into the room, and he asks for Ronald Reagan or Ronald Reagan's assistant. Well, Michael said, "Can I give him a message? They're not here." And the drunk man said, "Yes. Can you please tell them that when Ford makes his acceptance speech tomorrow at the end of the convention, he's going to call out to Reagan from the stage and ask him to come up on stage and say a few words." The man staggered out, walked away, never said who he was. So Michael talked to his family, and they decided, let's not tell anybody about this. This was crazy. We don't know who this guy is. Flash forward next day, end of the convention. Michael Reagan was at the hotel with his wife, and they're watching the end of the convention on the screen. Ford got up on stage, he made his acceptance speech, and of course, sure enough, at the end of his speech, he called out to Ronald Reagan and asked him to come on stage and say a few words. Michael said he was horrified in that moment because he realized he had told no one about the message from the drunk man. Reagan had no idea he was going to get called up on stage. He said he watched as the camera panned on Reagan, and Reagan leaned over and said something to his wife, Nancy. Whatever he said, Nancy's face got tight. Michael found out later what he said was, "I don't know what to say." Reagan then got up, walked on the stage, and gave what is considered to be one of the best speeches of his entire career. It's known as the time capsule speech. It's short and it's brilliant, and it fully articulates what Reagan believed as a conservative. Now, why am I telling you this story? And it was considered to be one of the best speeches ever. If you want to pull it up, it was fantastic. But why am I telling you this story? Well, I'm telling you this because it says something about Reagan, and it should say something about you too. How is it that Reagan was able to get up there on that stage and perfectly articulate what he believed as a conservative? It's because he had thought about it for years. He knew what he believed. So when he got up on that stage, he was able to talk about it because it was a part of who he was. Well, I want to encourage you to be that kind of a person. You need to be thinking about what it is that you believe, so that way when your time comes and you're asked to explain what it is you believe, you'll be ready and you'll know it because it'll be a part of who you are. And one of those issues has to be fiscal responsibility. This needs to be a core watershed issue in your life, whether you're running for office, whether you're thinking about running for office, whether you're a concerned citizen who wants to make a difference on policy in the future of Kentucky. This is an issue that you need to know about and you need to care about. So I want to encourage you, this is a big one. A little bit of a picture of why this is important for us nationally. I'm going to give you some numbers, so I'm going to pull out a paper so I get it right. This week, right now, we just looked up, we are in the third week of September. Right now, in the United States, the national debt is $26.7 trillion. That's with a T. That's an enormous amount of money. Give you some perspective, our GDP is $19.5 trillion. So our national debt is significantly more than what we're making this year. Another perspective, Social Security is something we often talk about, but I don't know if you realize it is right now on track to be insolvent in 2035. This is 2020. That is 15 years away from right now. This is a national crisis. It's one we need to take seriously, and we need to make sure we are doing something about this for the future. Okay, what about our state? What about Kentucky? Well, we have problems here too, and one of our main problems is our pension crisis. And I know you've heard about this on the news. It's a real thing, but I want to give you some numbers about that too. We have two major pension systems in Kentucky. One of them is the teacher's retirement system, and the other one is the KRS system, which is for state workers. So the KRS system right now is 13% funded. 13% funded. The TRS system for teachers is better. It's at 58% funded, but these are terrible numbers. Right now, it's taking $1 billion of our $11 billion general fund just to pay for our pensions. And with the 2020 economic crisis we've got going on right now, it's only going to get worse. Now, I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm telling you this because I want you to take this seriously. I want you to be involved. I want you to care. I want you to do something about this. Mike, a character from The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway, said he went bankrupt two ways: gradually and then suddenly. That's what happens at the state level. That's what happens at the national level. You need to care about this, and you have the tools to do it. It's just a math problem. It's just budgeting. So care about this, do something, make this a part of who you are. Thank you very much.
Why does it matter? It matters because freedom is at stake. Future generations are counting on us to preserve their freedom and their opportunities.
This patriotic movement, that's, there's a lot of people that are waking up, and they're realizing that, in order for evil to win, it just takes good men to do nothing. And good men are starting to stand back up to be counted. We have been the silent majority for so long, conservatives. The silent majority, because, most of us are, busy working and making a living and making America better.
The cost of not being involved is too great. We can't afford to not speak, to speak clearly, distinctly, and Christianly. And it is so worth it. In fact, it's worth everything, because my children, my grandchildren, those that are coming up behind us are counting on us to stand up for biblical values and for a Christian worldview.
There's an old saying, the squeaky gear gets the grease. And the secular world does a really good job of lobbying for its cause and shouting and making a lot of noise for anti-Christian values. And we need somebody who will stand in counter to that and speak up for those Judeo-Christian values that are dear to us.
Yeah, the ones that benefit by us speaking up, it's our children, and not just because of the impact we make today on change to keep these traditional values held up as important, but they actually see us. They watch us stand up for those things. So that helps them have strength down the road when they have to do the same thing. So I feel like it's critically important.
We're a light on a hill. That light has been diminished significantly. Register, vote. We can make a difference.
I believe that this moment is critical, and I believe it's doable. I know that God is stirring in the hearts and minds of Christians, and I believe that the Christian response to this is going to shape the remaining years, not just of our country, but of the world. And we need the gospel to be proclaimed and lived, because I do believe that the days are short. I believe Jesus is coming back. But in the meantime, we don't want to retire. We want to advance and get the gospel to the world.